Hi folks, it's Andy and welcome to today's Kendo rant. I've got something I want to rant on today, but I'm going to get through the questions and comments from the last few videos because we did have a lot, especially with it being such a great topic about the World Championships. So I'll get through them and then I'll get to what I want to rant about. First one, dear Andy, I totally agree with you regarding the WKC men's final match. It's kind of sad to see a team that's willing to win at all costs, taking actions or tactics in a not so nice, fair way to accomplish that. And it's sad to see this have happened in a final match. I've watched the 16th World Championships and it's also very physical and tactical, but in the 17th World Championships is way too far. I was angry a little bit and disgusted watching the match as what was there was not the Kendo I learned and practiced in the dojo I train. I practice Kendo to learn its value, to be a better person, to grow as a Kenshi. Winning or losing for me is not that relevant, although I acknowledge that this is an important part or aspect of it, right? My sensei is one of the referees in the final match between Korea and Japan, and I'm sure he has a lot to tell about it too. I'm sure he does. I hope he can share his thoughts on that. But I have a question for you. Don't you feel that Kendo is becoming a sport rather than a budo or way of life/values? The fact of Kendo becoming more and more physical, meaning the bigger, faster, high endurance allied with technique, would make Kendo turn into another level where Kendo is just a sport, and who does that is just like any other job or way to make a life with. Sorry if that sounds confusing, but looking at the final, it's sometimes that people are starting to lose the very principles of Kendo. Okay, a lot to unpack there actually. I'll try and get through it. Okay, so first off, let me just clarify a little bit on the point I made on the last video, right? I do not resent or hold any ill will towards any of the players of that match for doing everything that they possibly could to win. I didn't like some of the techniques that they were using, especially as I mentioned, the Korean team doing that sort of trick to hook in to do the not so much, it's not that I don't like them doing that. I just don't like the fact that they were avoiding to engage in Super Zeri properly, basically. I didn't really like that. But it doesn't matter if I like it or not. They were doing it to win. I respect their effort, and I respect the fact that they were doing everything they could to win. They have to win at all costs. They have to. So they have to play within the rules that they're sort of being governed by, to do everything they can to win, and I respect them for doing that. So I'm not kind of saying that they shouldn't have done that, because I'm just saying that it's a shame that there's not much more that can be done about it, because it doesn't quite cross what I disliked about it. For example, the refusing to engage in Super Zeri. What I disliked about it was that it's not really conducive to how Kendo is supposed to be. But for example, but it doesn't quite cross over into the boundary of being unfair to Super Zeri, which is Hansoku. So what they're doing wasn't really Hansoku. I guess if anything, they were wasting time, you could say. So they could have potentially been considered for a Hansoku for that. But I think my point really was that there was a lot of appeal going on, especially from the crowd, to try and have a Hansoku awarded to the Japanese side for time wasting in Super Zeri, when in fact it was, from my point of view, the Korean team was the one that was refusing to engage properly in Super Zeri, or using this trick of running in and then running out again, and therefore I think it's kind of fair enough really that the referees seem to have recognised that and didn't award the Hansoku to the Japanese team for the most part. I think that was the point I was more trying to make. In terms of your further point about your question about, that it's becoming more physical and more towards a sport. I mean, it would be wrong to deny that there is a very large sporting element of Kendo, and that is a very important aspect of Kendo as well. And I think it's wrong to kind of deny that in a way. It's a very, very important aspect of Kendo in Japan. Very important one. Most of the Japanese, even high-level teachers, sort of even that are 8th dan now, they started Kendo when they were kids, and when they're kids, it's completely a sport. You know, the kids over there aren't doing it for self-improvement reasons or stuff like that. I mean, the parents have got that in mind when they put them into it, but it's also very much a sporting activity. So the sporting aspect of Kendo is very existent, and it exists, and I don't deny it, and I don't, as somebody as myself that competed on that very same stage, I embrace it, and I think that it's an important part of Kendo, because it's what it's the main area that allows us to really experience what I think the concept of shobu is about, which is that victory and loss. It's the closest thing we've got to a real life or death situation. And I think that sort of pressure of win at all costs is very important for one's development in Kendo. So I don't necessarily disparage that aspect of it. And it is a situation, and here's the thing, right? Here's the thing is, like I said, about, so what I said yesterday about the winning at all costs thing. Yeah, right. What people like, you know, most of us, like myself, you know, probably Kendo is more involved in my life than it is for most people. Okay, for most people that do Kendo, because it's everything that I do. But even so, if I perform poorly in a Kendo shiai, or if I lose a very important Kendo match, it doesn't have a large sort of negative effect on my everyday life. It certainly doesn't affect my income or my job. It's a very different situation to the people that are playing in the World Championships finals. I'm not entirely sure what the situation is for most of these guys on the Korean team. It wouldn't surprise me if they were in a similar situation, but I know for a fact that the Japanese team, Kendo it's not a kind of a hobby or a pastime for those guys. It's not like it's not. They're not doing it for self-improvement even. I'm not saying that they deny that aspect of it, right? But it's not that they've come to Kendo thinking they want to get better as people, or that they want to. Most of them, if any of them, I'd be surprised if any of them even chose to start Kendo in the first place. Probably most of them started off the back of their parents doing it. I know at least 2 of them have got very high-level sensei as parents. So of the men's team, that is. So. And now they're in a situation where they've gone through Kendo throughout the whole life, and it's essentially everything that they do, and it's their job, it's their career. It's not, you know, and if they lose that match, then that could have a negative effect on that. That could affect their next promotion. It could lead to a demotion. It could directly affect their income. So that's one of the reasons that the World Championships, for example, gets like that. And to be honest, it's nothing. It's nothing compared to any of the matches that happen at the All Japan Police Championships. They're much worse, much worse in my opinion. And I don't like the Police Championships for that reason, because they're a little bit too sort of situated around that, and they're too detractive for me in terms of what Kendo is about. Because what you have there is you have policemen that are fighting each other, and they're getting if they go and they don't do very well, then their boss, who probably doesn't even do Kendo, has nothing to do with Kendo at all, is the one that's going to turn around to them and then say, well, okay, then you're fired. So yeah, I mean, they've got a lot more rested on it than the average person, even most of the other competitors in the entire tournament. So it goes without saying that they fight with much more ferocity. Okay, let's move on. This is more of a comment. It says, Andy, I wanted to chime in about the question regarding the sore throat after high-pitched yelling. I'm not an expert, but I do have fairly extensive vocal training. I can say with certainty that any soreness of the throat is a bad sign. My suggestion would be to stay in ranges that are comfortable and don't hurt. It can be hard to effectively utilize the diaphragm while going for a high pitch. Okay, so this is based off a comment that a question that came on the last video I did about sort of the pitch of Kiai and how their throat was feeling afterwards. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. if it's hurting, if you feel pain, because you were saying that you usually did a sort of low pitch Kiai, but recently you'd found a high pitch Kiai was more, you were finding it better for you, but you had a sort of funny feeling in your throat afterwards. As I said yesterday, if it's causing you pain, then you have to, you have to change it. You know, anything that's painful, you definitely don't want to do that, or sore. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm no expert on it either, so I don't want to give out too much advice on that sort of thing. Okay. Hi Andy, newbie question. So during the first match, the Korean player slipped and fell, and yet the Japanese player struck the back of the head of the Korean player still lying down flat on his stomach. Can you elaborate on the situation with Kendo rules and regulations? I see players fell down during the match all the time, but don't see the judges stopping the matches immediately. On what point do the judges stop the match when that occurs? Okay, so there's no hard and fast rule on this, but generally we're taught as kind of Shimpan are generally taught that you've got a short while. I've heard the term like within one breath, but I don't. That seems a bit vague to me. Essentially, it's up to the judgment of the Shimpan, but just falling over isn't, or being pushed over, doesn't result in an instant sort of pause of the match. You can still be struck whilst you're on the floor. Part of the reason for this is to hopefully stop people just diving on the floor. Because they want to stop the match, but basically, yeah. So if you knock someone over or someone falls over, you've actually got like about a second or so. You've got time to make one attack before the Shimpan usually calls Yame, and if you make that strike and it's a good strike, it's accurate and it's good enough to be considered Yuko Datotsu, then you can score in that situation as well. So that's why that happened. I absolutely don't think for a second, and it's quite obvious that the Japanese player was not aiming for the back of the guy's head. It's just what happened. The guy obviously hit off reflex, and the other guy just had his head down and sort of hit him on the back of the head. The guy was fine, obviously when he stood up, but you could see from the Japanese player's reaction that he hadn't intended to do that. But yeah, that's basically how that works. Hi Andy, thanks for sharing your thoughts. I totally agree with you about the finals. I'm happy to read that most commenters here do too. So yeah, that's basically a comment saying, yeah, knowing at least one of the Shimpan, I'm sure they made their decisions based on their best knowledge, and who if not them, yeah. Out of all the people, they got chosen. So good, thank you. Sorry, I thought that was a question, it was just a comment, but yeah, thank you very much. Hi Andy, this might be a beginner's question, but why do in team matches they continue to fight even after one side has 3 victories? The match already has a winning team, so why not stop there and declare which team is the winner? Yeah, so in Kendo we don't do that. In Kendo team Shiai, you always fight all of the matches, regardless of the result. So even if the first 3 matches result in a victory, then we still continue the other 2 matches until the entire Shiai is finished. I'm not sure of the exact specific reason for that, it's just always been that way. I guess one reason off the top of my head is there are a few things that can result in complete disqualification of your team. So actually the fight's not over until it's over. So for example, one team could get 3 wins, and then in the next or in the match after that, they could commit an offence that actually disqualifies their team, for example. So that's probably the. Well, I don't think that's the actual reason about that, but that's certainly a potential, reason for it, should I say? Okay, so next one. This is quite a long question. I've saved this one for a little bit later in the video because it's quite a difficult one, to be honest. Says, hi Andy, thank you so much for all your advice. It's incredibly helpful. Thank you very much. I was wondering if you could give me some advice. Recently at my dojo, I was leading the session with a small group. Sadly, many of them were late or absent, and 3 of the members who are newly in Borgu, and while getting the men on, all of the people newly in Borgu were slightly slower, which is completely fine. I understand why. So we began the session without them, as it was basic Kihon, and they could join in when they had their Borgu on properly. The 3rd person took a lot longer to get into the Borgu than everyone else, and just as he was about to start the session, he just left. Later said he was not coming back to Kendo because I did not respect him. I really do not understand how I can help him. The first time he was in Borgu, the session was basically dedicated to him and teaching him how to put it on. There were only 4 people at the session and I was not leading it. And the second time he was in Borgu, he was again led through how to put everything on, as were the other 2 people. This was their first time in Borgu. The third person had been shown many times how to put it on. And I thought for this session I would see if they could do it on their own. I wanted to see if they could do it, and if they couldn't do it on there, I would have loved it if any of them asked for help. This is because I think it's important to know your limits, and there's no shame in asking for help. But the third person never asked for help, and as much as I really just wanted to just do it for him, it would have been quicker. It would have been really demeaning. The person's a full-grown adult, and I'm technically still a teenager. And basically, I didn't help him and started the session without him. Because I don't respect him, he's not doing Kendo anymore. I really need your advice on this because it's a small club and we don't want to lose members for any reason. On a similar but different note, how can I get people to turn up on time? We occasionally have 1-hour sessions and people turn up halfway through to disrupt the entire session because some ask for special treatment, i.e. to be taken to the side and shown everything they've missed. And even after I've told everyone by turning up late, you're not just wasting your time but everybody else's. But the third person is consistently late, usually the reason that he slept in. Once he came halfway through his grading, obviously he, needless to say, he failed. I really don't know how to get people to take time waiting seriously. I don't know how to get people to listen to me when I'm leading a session. Many are older than me and are all less than 3rd Q, and I'm shodan. And I know that I have so much to learn, that's why I love these videos. Thank you. As so many of them, and they don't often let me finish an explanation. Usually they butt in and say something wrong or contradictory, and it happens so often. Even after I politely ask them not to cut me off before I've finished. For more context, I come from a small university club in England. Thank you for your advice. I'm very sorry about the long question. Okay, so that was a bit of a long one to get through, and there's quite a lot to get at in there. Sorry for sort of chopping through it there. I did want to just get it all out because I do think that there's quite a lot of things to get at there. Okay, so the first point, your guy that came, he just started Kendo. It's his sort of 3rd session in Borg. He can't put it on himself. He was taking ages, so he started the practice on his own. Here's how I'd have handled that, mate, right? What I'd have done is I wouldn't have started the practice. I would have had somebody help him put it on, or I'd have done it myself without asking him. And whilst I was doing it, I'd have said to him, look, mate, to be honest, it's about time you could do this yourself because we need to start practice. And now you're holding everybody up. And if he doesn't like that, if he doesn't think that, obviously he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder. If he thinks that you don't respect him because of that, then sorry, I'd let him leave if he wanted to, because from the sounds of what you've said, and obviously I wasn't there and I didn't see it, and something else could have obviously happened from his point of view, but from what you've said, I'd be happy to let someone like that just walk away. I understand that's difficult with a small club, but what you have to do is just put more effort into getting more people into your club, because some people just are like that. In terms of people turning up late, I'd outright refuse to let anybody be taken to the side to be shown what they've missed already. They have to show up on time, or they miss out. And if they don't turn up, then they join in where everybody else is. I think you've obviously got a bit of an issue with sort of authority in the club itself. I don't know if you're the club leader. If you are, then you need to make sure that these people understand that it's regardless of age, and that they have to follow the way you lead the practice. If you're not, then I would be going to your actual club leader and finding out what they think. But in terms of, if somebody's turning up late, especially if it's because they slept in, I wouldn't be finding that acceptable, to be honest. I wouldn't, I wouldn't be sort of, I certainly wouldn't be setting somebody aside and letting them go through what they've missed already just because they couldn't bother to get there in time. And in terms of when I was explaining something, if somebody started to interrupt, I'd just shut them down on the spot and say, wait till I've finished. I'm probably some of the people at the club I teach at in Manchester, they might tell you actually that I'm not such a nice guy when I'm teaching Kendo. I'm not the Kendo show guy when I'm teaching at the club because I've got a job to do, which is to teach them and help them improve Kendo. It's not, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm outright rude, but probably they think so sometimes when I ask them to wait before butting in what I'm saying, or I tell them to move quickly, or I tell them to do something the correct way instead of doing it the wrong way just because they think it's the right way. I don't run the dojo. This might be controversial. This is what's very difficult, I think, for Kendo in the West, actually. But I don't run my dojo as a committee. If I'm leading the session, then I'm in charge and everyone does what I say. As simple as that. If they don't want to do that, then I don't need to lead the session. They can try and figure it out for themselves. Now, obviously, I realise that at Shodan, that's difficult, and especially if you're in your sort of teens, that can be very difficult as well. But I do sort of have experience of that. When I first started teaching Kendo, when I first, like in the UK, when I got my Shodan, and I must have only been about 21 at the time as well. So, probably not that far away from you. But yeah, it's a difficult one. But I just, I'd be a little bit more assertive, to be honest. So I hope that helps with that. If you wanna shoot me an email or add me on Facebook or something, I'll do whatever I can to help you, especially as you're in the UK. My email address is mail@kendostar.com, and if you shoot me a message on on Facebook, if I'm ever in your area, I'll certainly pop down your club and see what I can sort out myself. Next question is over on the Kendo Show Early Access group. If you're not in the group, get in the group. It says, just a minute, I just scrolled past it. It says, hi Andy, I was watching the team competitions of the World Championships and I noticed that the rest of the team has to wait in Seiza. Since I started training, I can barely stay a few minutes in Seiza and I can't even imagine staying in that amount of time. I feel like I'm not the only one with this problem. Do you have any tips to help staying in Seiza longer? Also, thanks for the Kendo rants. I love them and watch them every day. Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so, right. Team Kiai, the team is supposed to sit in Seiza throughout the Senpo match, the first match, and throughout the Taisho match, the final match. Between that, you don't have to sit in Seiza. Unless, of course, if it's the Senpo match and you're the Jiho, the next one, you don't have to sit in Seiza, you can stand up. But in the Taisho match, everyone sits in Seiza. It's not that long, it's like 5 minutes or something per match, and then you can sort of stretch out or not a bit. Now, okay. I understand exactly where you're coming from because I was really not very good at doing Seiza either when I first started out in Kendo. But moving to Japan really changed that because you have to sit in Seiza in Japan all the time. I'm still not that good at it compared to like the regular Japanese person. I don't like to sort of sit in Seiza for like an extended period. I certainly can't do it for more than sort of 15 or 20 minutes without it being very uncomfortable. So, but I guess what it is practice more than anything, to be honest. You just get used to it the more you do it. So, unfortunately, that's the only thing you can do. Is I think you can do some stretching or stuff like that, maybe. But yeah, the more you sit in Seiza, the longer you'll be able to do it for. Okay. Okay, so that's the comments. I'm gonna get through a little bit of a rant now, with some of the time that I've got left. It's not a majorly long one, but I think it's a pertinent topic. Today, I'm gonna go back to this book that I talked about from the other day. This is the grading questions from 1st Dan to 5th Dan, and this is the answer to a question, example question that's given about Kihon Datotsu, so basic techniques, basic strikes, sorry, waza, no renshu, so practice. The practice of basic strikes and techniques, and what you should be careful of, points you should be careful of when practicing techniques and waza. So there's 3 points. 3 points. They're really simple. The first one, it says you should have the correct posture and good spirit, and try to strike from the position of semeai. So not just ya, men, or something like that. You should actually try to consider semeai from both sides. Ya, men. So it's a little bit sort of realistic. So essentially you're also practicing your seme. Number 2 says from the appropriate distance and with correct kikentai ichi. Make the yuko datotsu. Okay, so you have to make the strike that would be considered valid. Okay, it has to be the yuko datotsu. Number 3, it says first you do slowly, large, and accurate strikes. That should be your focus at the beginning. Then, with continued practice, you become able to make strikes that are fast, strong, and even more accurate. Okay, that's it. That's what it says. Okay, so correct posture, correct spirit with seme. Then, from the correct distance with kikentai no ichi, make the correct yuko datotsu. First, start out slow, big, and accurate, and with doing so you'll become able to do quickly, strongly, powerfully, and even more accurately. Okay, so why am I talking about this? Okay, all that stuff sounds obvious, right? Well, yeah, it's super obvious, but are we really doing it? Yeah, I want you to ask yourself that question. Are you really doing that every time you go to the dojo and your teacher or whatever says, okay, 5 times menuchi, okay, 5 times menuchi? Are you really considering these points? All right, are you considering the best posture with the good spirit and semeai? Okay, or are you just going, yeah, step in, man, just kind of randomly, or kind of I can't think of an English word for tekito, or Japanese word tekito, like kind of like half-heartedly. Number 2, and are you really considering your mai, your distance? Are you considering your kikentai no ichi? Are you actually striking with good kikentai no ichi? Essentially, for the most part, that means having good fumikomi. And are the strikes yuko datotsu? And finally, if you are not doing it perfectly or doing it very well, then you may need to slow down, yeah, and make sure that you're doing it correctly, yeah. And with that practice, you can't expect it to happen naturally, all right? You can't just practice over and over again. Just repeating something isn't enough in Kendo, right? You've got to do it. You've got to do it actively. You've got to actively be practicing in order to improve. Okay, otherwise you're not going to. So you have to be considering these things in order to be able to make faster strikes, stronger strikes, more accurate strikes, and strikes that are essentially better ippon all overall. All right. So I really want you to think about that, because it's really easy, especially when you get tired, to throw all that out the window and just try and coast through until it's time for jigeko. But you don't want to be doing that, otherwise you'll never get any better. All right, so really do think about that, especially that point on making the yuko datotsu. All right, has to be yuko datotsu. I often say this to the guys I teach. I often say, look, all right, if you can't hit your opponent now, if you can't make the perfect yuko datotsu right now when they're letting you hit them, you've got no chance when they're trying to hit you back. Okay, so in this case, it has to be yuko datotsu, all right? Because if you can't do your yuko datotsu in your kihon geiko, then you've got no chance of doing it in a realistic situation. Okay, that's about it for today. I want you to take those points away though, and do implement them in your practice. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments. Give me more questions to answer next time. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. You know, the Facebook, social media. stuff. Say it every day. And most importantly, do your shopping at KendoStar, because that's what keeps the lights on. All right, thanks a lot for watching, folks, and I'll see you next time.